That girl will never sit at our table.
Is that so?
No, it can't be.
I've been looking for you. My granddaughter.
She froze when the crystal chandelier flickered above her head. The laughter around the table slowed, then stopped. Aaliyah stood there in a borrowed dress, hands trembling, as Diane Hartwell leaned closer and smiled without warmth. "That girl will never sit at our table," Diane said, loud enough for the room to hear. The words cut deep. Old wounds, old shame. Aaliyah swallowed hard, forcing herself not to cry. She had survived worse than this. Then the door slammed. Every head turned as a silver-haired man stepped inside, his presence heavy, commanding. His cane struck the marble floor once. "Is that so?" he asked calmly. Lenora Hartwell's face drained of color. "No, it can't be," she whispered. The man's eyes locked onto Aaliyah, softened, broke. "I've been looking for you," he said. "My granddaughter." Gasps filled the room. Secrets cracked. Lies trembled. And that's where her story truly began. Before we dive deeper, please, if you're listening to this right now, I want to prove my mom wrong. She said I can't even reach 5,000 subscribers. Help me show her that stories like this matter. Subscribe to King's Folklore, and let's keep breathing life into tales that refuse to die. Now, let's continue. The room smelled like expensive perfume and quiet judgment. Crystal glasses clinked softly, and violins hummed in the background, but Aaliyah heard none of it. All she could hear was her own heartbeat, fast, uneven, pounding in her ears as every pair of eyes stayed locked on her. She stood frozen beside the long mahogany table, the empty seat glaring at her like an accusation. Diane Hartwell's words still hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. "That girl will never sit at our table." Aaliyah had known this night wouldn't be easy. From the moment she stepped into the gala hall, she felt it. The way conversations paused when she walked by, the way smiles tightened when people asked where she was from. She didn't belong here, not by their standards. She was a scholarship winner, not a donor's daughter. A girl raised by a struggling single mother, not groomed by privilege. Still, she came. Not for them, for her mother. Charlotte Monroe had always told her, "Walk into every room like you deserve to be there, even when they try to convince you otherwise." Charlotte had passed 2 years earlier, worn down by illness and a lifetime of disappointment. Tonight, Aaliyah wore her courage like armor. Diane, seated at the head of the table in a shimmering ivory gown, leaned back with a satisfied smirk. Lenora Hartwell, her mother, sat beside her, fingers gripping her wine glass just a little too tightly. Lenora didn't smile. She stared at Aaliyah as if she were looking at a ghost. "You must be lost," Diane added smoothly, tilting her head. "Staff entrance is around the corner." A few people chuckled nervously. Others looked away, embarrassed but silent. Aaliyah felt a familiar burn behind her eyes. "Don't cry. Not here. I was invited," Aaliyah said quietly. Her voice shook, but she didn't raise it. "By the foundation committee." Diane laughed once, short and dismissive. "Invited doesn't mean included. Have you ever been humiliated in a room full of people who pretended not to see it?" Aaliyah had. Too many times. She nodded slowly, as if accepting the rejection, and took a small step back. That was when the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The double doors at the far end of the hall creaked open. At first, no one turned. Then a deep, steady tap echoed across the marble floor. Cane against stone. Once. Twice. Conversations dissolved into whispers. Heads turned. Shoulders straightened. A tall, elderly man entered, dressed in a tailored black suit that looked simple, but expensive in the way only true wealth can be. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture rigid despite his age. His eyes, sharp and observant, swept across the room like he owned it. Because he did. Thaddeus Belmont stopped just inside the doorway. The name moved through the room like electricity. People stood instinctively. Some gasped. Others smiled too quickly. A few reached for their phones before remembering where they were. Lenora's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. "No," she breathed, her face pale. This isn't possible." Thaddeus ignored her. His gaze drifted, past the chandeliers, past the table, past Diane's forced smile, until it landed on Aaliyah. Time slowed. Something changed in his expression. The sternness melted, replaced by disbelief, then grief. His eyes glistened, and his grip on the cane tightened. There are moments in life when the truth recognizes you before you recognize it. This was one of them. "You," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Come closer, child." The room held its breath. Aaliyah hesitated. She glanced around, unsure if this was another cruel joke. Diane opened her mouth, but Lenora grabbed her arm sharply, eyes wide with panic. Aaliyah stepped forward. Thaddeus studied her face as if memorizing it. Her eyes, her cheekbones, the small scar near her brow she'd had since childhood. His breath caught. "You have your mother's eyes," he said softly. Aaliyah's chest tightened. You knew my mother?" The question cracked something open. Thaddeus straightened and turned slowly to face the room. His voice grew firm, carrying authority that demanded silence. "For decades," he said, "I was led to believe my daughter died angry, estranged, and unwilling to forgive me." Lenora stiffened. "I was told she wanted nothing to do with my name, my fortune, my life." His eyes flicked to Lenora briefly, like a blade. All eyes. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aaliyah's hands began to shake. "My mother never spoke about her father," she whispered. "She said he abandoned her." Thaddeus closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they shone with regret. "She was stolen from me." The word landed heavy. Lenora rose suddenly. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're confusing the girl." Security. Thaddeus struck his cane once against the floor. The sound silenced her. "You will sit down," he said coldly. "You've spoken enough for one lifetime." Diane looked between them, her confidence draining by the second. "Grandfather, maybe this isn't the place." "Oh, it's exactly the place," Thaddeus replied. "Because tonight was built on my money, my legacy, and my silence." People shifted uncomfortably. Phones came out again. He turned back to Aaliyah. "What is your full name, child?" "Aaliyah Monroe," she answered. "My mother was Charlotte Monroe." The room exploded into whispers. Thaddeus nodded slowly, as if confirming what his heart already knew. "Then you are Aaliyah Monroe Belmont." Lenora let out a broken sound, half gasp, half sob. Diane stood abruptly. "That's impossible. We've handled the estate for years." "There's nothing." "There's everything," Thaddeus interrupted, "including proof." He gestured to the men who had entered behind him. Lawyers, auditors, quiet professionals carrying folders thick with truth. What would you do if your entire identity changed in one moment? Aaliyah felt dizzy. The chandeliers blurred above her. Billionaire, grandfather, betrayal. Her mother's suffering suddenly had a shape. A name. Thaddeus stepped closer to her and lowered his voice. "I failed your mother once. I won't fail you." Tears finally slipped down Aaliyah's cheeks, not from shame, but from release. Behind them, Lenora sank back in her chair, her empire beginning to crumble in silence. The room no longer felt like a celebration. The music had stopped completely, replaced by low murmurs and the sharp sound of papers being laid out on the table. What was once a place of luxury now felt like a courtroom. Lenora Hartwell sat stiffly, her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes darting from face to face. Diane hovered beside her, confusion written all over her perfect posture. For the first time in her life, Diane didn't understand what was happening, and that terrified her. Thaddeus Belmont remained standing, calm but unyielding. The years had not weakened him. If anything, they had sharpened him. "For 32 years, he began, I searched for my daughter. I sent investigators. I followed false trails. I believed lies because they were delivered by someone I trusted." His gaze locked onto Lenora. "You told me Charlotte ran away," he said. "You said she was ashamed of the Belmont name. You said she demanded never to be found." Lenora shook her head slowly, forcing a thin laugh. "You're remembering things wrong. You were grieving. Anyone could have manipulated you." A few people nodded uncertainly. Power still lingered around her like perfume. Thaddeus motioned to one of the lawyers. A folder slid across the table, stopping directly in front of Lenora. "Bank transfers," he said. forged signatures, property deeds rerouted through shell companies, and letters, dozens of them, written by Charlotte Monroe. Letters you intercepted and destroyed. Aaliyah's breath caught. "My mother wrote to you?" she whispered. Thaddeus nodded, pain flashing across his face. "Every year. She begged me to meet you, to acknowledge you." Aaliyah felt something collapse inside her chest. All those nights her mother cried, quietly. All those times she said, "Some doors never open, baby." They had been slammed shut on purpose. Diane stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mom, what is he talking about?" Lenora stood abruptly. "Enough," she snapped. "This man is trying to steal what's ours using some sob story and a girl who looks convenient enough to play the part." The word girl echoed in the room. Thaddeus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Lenora Hartwell," he said evenly, "you married into my family with ambition and patience. When my wife died, you saw opportunity. When my daughter refused to be molded, you saw a threat." Lenora's hands clenched. "You altered documents," he continued. "Moved funds. You ensured Charlotte lived just above desperation. Never enough to leave, never enough to fight back." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Aaliyah felt anger rise, hot and unfamiliar. "She worked 3 jobs," she said suddenly. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "She skipped meals so I could eat. She died waiting for health care she couldn't afford." Lenora flinched. "That was your doing," Aaliyah whispered. Diane stared at her mother, horror slowly replacing denial. "Mom, tell me he's lying." Lenora opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. "Have you ever defended someone your whole life, only to realize you never knew them at all?" Thaddeus straightened. "Effective immediately," he said. "All Hartwell-controlled assets tied to the Belmont estate are frozen. Lenora Hartwell, you are removed as trustee. Diane Hartwell, your accounts are under review pending investigation." Diane's face crumpled. "Grandfather, please, I didn't know." "I believe you," Thaddeus said softly. "But ignorance does not undo harm." Security stepped forward. Lenora backed away, shaking her head. "You can't do this. This is my life." "You built it on stolen ground," Thaddeus replied. "Now you will answer for it." As Lenora was escorted out, her composure shattered. "Charlotte was weak," she screamed. "She would have wasted everything." Aaliyah flinched, but Thaddeus placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "She was strong," he said firmly. "Stronger than you'll ever understand." Silence followed. Heavy. Final. The gala guests began to disperse, whispers trailing behind them like smoke. Power shifted in real time. People who once ignored Aaliyah now avoided her eyes altogether. Aaliyah sank into a chair, legs trembling. "I don't know how to be this," she admitted quietly. Thaddeus crouched beside her, lowering himself despite the ache in his bones. "You don't have to be anything tonight. Just breathe." She looked at him. "My mother deserved better." "Yes," he said, "and through you, she will finally have it." Later that night, in the quiet of Thaddeus's private study, Aaliyah learned the rest. The truth unfolded slowly, painfully. How Charlotte had been sent away for her own good. How letters were burned. How money meant for education and care was redirected. Aaliyah listened without interrupting, tears sliding silently down her face. When it was over, she stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. "All this," she said softly, "and she never once told me to hate you." Thaddeus's voice broke. "She gave me mercy I didn't earn." Aaliyah turned back. Her eyes were steady now. "I don't want revenge." He studied her carefully and smiled. "Then you truly are my granddaughter." Morning light poured through the tall windows of the Belmont estate, soft and golden, touching everything Aaliyah had only seen in magazines before. The house was quiet, not the cold, echoing quiet of loneliness, but the gentle stillness of a place waking up. Aaliyah stood in the guest room, staring at her reflection. Same face, same scar near her brow, same girl who once waited in long clinic lines with her mother. Yet nothing felt the same. Downstairs, Thaddeus waited in the breakfast room, reading glasses perched on his nose. When he saw her, he smiled. Not the polished smile of power, but the uncertain one of a man hoping he hadn't already failed again. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "A little," Aaliyah replied, sitting across from him. "Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing my mother's voice." Thaddeus nodded. "She has a way of staying." They ate quietly for a moment. Then Aaliyah spoke. "They're saying my name differently already, like it belongs to them now." He set his cup down. "Your name belongs to you. Money doesn't change that. Only reveals who people really are." Later that day, lawyers came and went. Papers were signed. Accounts shifted. News broke quietly, then loudly. Headlines whispered Belmont heir found and Hartwell's scandal uncovered. Diane resigned from boards she once dominated. Lenora was formally charged, her empire collapsing under the weight of truth. But Aaliyah stayed away from the noise. Instead, she asked to see the old photographs. Thaddeus led her into a small room tucked behind the library. On the walls were frames untouched by time. A young Charlotte smiled from nearly every corner, laughing, stubborn, alive. Aaliyah pressed a hand to the glass. "She loved deeply," she said. "She loved quietly," Thaddeus replied. "And she forgave even when it hurt." That night, as rain tapped against the windows, Aaliyah sat alone at the desk in her room, staring at a blank notebook. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about purpose. What would you do if everything you prayed for finally arrived, became wrapped in grief? She began to write. Not numbers, not plans for luxury. Names. Families she remembered from the shelter. Mothers who slept in cars so their children could finish school. Neighbors who died waiting for help that never came. The next morning, she brought the notebook to Thaddeus. "I don't want my mother's story to end in pain," she said. "I want it to become a door for other people." He read silently. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "What are you proposing?" "The Charlotte Monroe Memorial Foundation," Aaliyah said. "Medical care, housing support, scholarships, grief counseling, the things she needed and never got." Thaddeus leaned back slowly, as if absorbing the weight of it. Then he smiled, proud and peaceful. She would have loved that. The launch was quiet at first. No flashigadas. No headlines begging for attention. Just work, real work. Clinics funded. Homes repaired. Students enrolled. And Aaliyah showed up. She sat with families. She listened more than she spoke. When people called her Miss Belmont, she corrected them gently. Just Aaliyah. One afternoon, she visited a small community center on the east side of the city. A little girl tugged her sleeve and asked, "Are you rich?" Aaliyah laughed softly. "I have enough." "That's good," the girl said. "Enough means you can share." Aaliyah smiled, eyes stinging. "You're right." Months passed. Lenora was sentenced quietly, her name fading from the social pages she once ruled. Diane started over, smaller, humbler, learning what life felt like without inherited power. She sent Aaliyah a letter once. No excuses, just apology. Aaliyah never replied, but she forgave. One evening, she and Thaddeus sat on the estate's back porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. "Do you regret coming back?" he asked carefully. Aaliyah shook her head. "I regret that my mother didn't get to see this." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I regret that I didn't fight harder." She reached for his hand. "You're fighting now." Silence settled between them, comfortable, healing. Aaliyah looked out at the horizon. "I think real wealth is making sure someone else doesn't grow up feeling invisible." Thaddeus smiled. Then the Belmont legacy is finally in the right hands. And for the first time, Aaliyah Monroe Belmont felt whole. Not because of money, not because of power, but because truth had finally found its voice. Moral of the story. Some inherit money. Others inherit pain. But the rarest inheritance is purpose. Aaliyah learned that dignity can't be bought, and legacy isn't measured by what you own, but by who you lift. Lies may delay justice, but truth always finds its way home. And even when love is stolen, it can be rebuilt through compassion, service, and forgiveness. Speech Balloon, if this story touched you. Hit that subscribe button for more emotional tales from King's Folklore. And even if it didn't, come on, subscribe anyway. We'll win you over next time. Drop a comment, like the video, and let's keep the stories alive. Thanks for watching.